We love Zencaster because it allows us to record the audio for our podcast and create the video segments we use for our weekly Sister Scoop episodes. Zencaster has helped us make content capture simple.
It's now super easy to record a podcast with Zencaster. Log in using your browser and start recording a high-quality podcast right away. Record studio quality sound and up to 4K video with your guests, and feel a sense of zen knowing Zencaster's multi-layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable.
If you've thought about podcasting before and realized that you need a lot of different tools and services, those days are over. With Zencaster's all-in-one podcasting platform, you can create your podcast in one place and distribute it to Spotify, Apple, and other major destinations.
Just go to zencastr.com/pricing and use our code SistersAssembled, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencaster paid plan. We want you to have the same easy experiences we do for all of our podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story.
Katie and I are always hungry, and one snack we both love is beef jerky. That's why we're so excited to tell you about one of our favorite jerky brands, Matt Hat Jerky.
Matt Hat's delicious taste makes it a great snack, and the variety of flavors, including original, black truffle, and my personal favorite, roasted garlic, means there's a flavor for everyone. Plus, it's local to the area where we grew up in, which we just love.
Use the link in the show notes below to get some Matt Hat Jerky for yourself, and make sure to use our coupon code SistersAssembled for 10% off. Hello and welcome to Sisters Assembled, your home for all things MCU. And in case you didn't notice, that's not Kate over there with me on the other side of the screen. That is friend of the pod, Davis, who is filling in for Katie while she is on her beach vacation. Lucky her. So thank you, Davis, for joining us today while we are covering all things X-Men 97, Season 2, Episode 4. And on that note, if you have not watched episode 4 yet, please make sure that you do that before you chime into this episode, because there will be lots and lots of spoilers today. So we don't want to spoil it for you. Come back once you've watched the episode. This is your final warning. On that note, Davis, what did you think of episode 4?
So I think by far this has been my favorite episode. I mean, I've enjoyed them all. But I think being able to stay in the past has been helpful. Like, as we know, the first 3 episodes kind of jumped around a little bit in time. And I know based on you and Katie's reactions to 1 through 3, some were bigger fans than others, because I know time travel is not your favorite, as you said. So that we stayed in one time frame was great. And it's so interesting. It was interesting to learn about the background of, the X-Men's greatest foe, where he started from, what his ambitions are, what he, aims to do, what are his motives. Because I think in the first 3 episodes, it was really just not really talked about. So you're like, okay, like this Apocalypse guy, we know in the future he becomes this big, evil villain. But like, why? Why does he do that? Why does he hate the X-Men? So it was very interesting to hear that. And I think how it kind of tied in more to like, the most recent MCU post, the most recent Marvel projects like Eternals, Ant-Man, Quantumania, with, let's not jump ahead. Let's not jump ahead right here. I'm getting ahead of myself, but I really enjoyed this episode. It was nice to kind of go back and learn more about Charles Xavier and Magneto's history. And like how they're good friends.
I think those two, we have spent so much time on this show talking about their relationship, and for it to end this way, let me take a step back, because I don't even want to get to...
You think it's an end? Do you think this is it? Like...
No, I wasn't thinking about this when I watched the episode, until I saw someone on Threads say that this is the perfect setup for Onslaught, which, if you're not familiar, I know this is something I think we talked about in season 1, but Onslaught is like the combination of like the worst parts of Charles Xavier and the worst parts of Magneto. And like, now that Magneto's gone and Charles was there when it happened, and I mean, the fact that Charles like whipped out to Apocalypse, like, I wish your mother had just like killed you, which was, a first of all brutal line coming from anyone,
Yeah.
but to come from like Charles Xavier, who's like the human embodiment of mercy and second chances, was just insane. So I actually think that we're going to get a really changed Professor X this season. I think this moment is going to be a huge catalyst for his character being really different from what we've seen in the past, which I'm honestly okay with. Sometimes Charles gets on my nerves. He's like so much
Yeah.
more infinitely patient than me, so I can't really like relate to him all the time. I admire it, but I just like can't relate. So I'll be curious to see if he kind of goes on a little bit of a darker path this season because of what he witnessed and what Apocalypse actually did.
Yeah, I think that would be really interesting because, I mean, for my life and all the movies and content we've seen with the professor, like he's always been the very level-headed, clear-cut, here's good, here's bad, here's where I stand.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously trying to help mutant kids out by learning them, how to have their powers and control them and all that stuff. It would be very interesting to see a different side of him,
Mm-hmm.
because we've always known him not quite the Boy Scout that Scott and Cap are,
Yes.
but to see a different version of him might, I mean, it would be, is he going to be the same? Like you said, is he going to be the same professor? Are we going to see, how is he get, first of all, I guess he jumped back in time, presumably, I guess we don't know where, but presumably back to the 90s. What is he going to find there? How is he going to react? It's I don't know. It's really interesting to see because we know him as a good guy, but when you go through something like that, seeing someone that you've had your differences with, but that you're able to just see get killed right in front of your eyes. I mean, that changes somebody. That changes a person. Yes, I'm looking forward to seeing where Charles goes in his character arc in this next episode, to see if he's going to change at all or if he's going to, maintain the same level-headedness and say, put his feelings towards Eric aside and say, hey, look, I know that was terrible. That's awful. But there's something more important. And, I can grieve when, we save the world. I can grieve later, or if he does something different. So I think that'll be very interesting.
It will. And I think the other thing to think about too is we saw Professor X, I think, towing the line a little bit more even in season one. Like I'm thinking about, I want to say it was the finale when he like forces himself into Magneto's mind. I think even Scott was kind of shocked by like the violence and the violation of that act because I mean, he really Xavier doesn't really use his powers in that way. It's more of like, he'll go in there to someone's mind and he will, maybe extract information, but a lot of times he's doing it to help someone, to help them work through something, to maybe unlock something that has been, pushed down like in terms of like repressed. But I think the violence of that action kind of showed that he was already maybe changing a little bit, and then you see something, to your point, this violent to someone happen to someone who you love, regardless of the history that you have at that point. Magneto and Charles were on the same side. They had been for quite a bit. And they chose to handle the Apocalypse situation differently, but they were still, Magneto was fully invested in Charles's goal for the first time since maybe the beginning of their friendship, and so I think they were in a better place in their friendship than they had been in a while. And then for it to happen at that point with Magneto for sacrificing himself or thinking he's making the sacrifice play to then be murdered, I mean, I think it's very possible that we're going to see a Charles who's maybe not quite so, what's the word, attached to his morals in the way that he always has been. And I'll be curious, to your point, what someone like Scott thinks of that, because he was raised by Charles and gets so much of his morality and so much of his thinking from Charles.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely going to be eye-opening for a lot of the characters because I don't think we're going to see the same Charles. I mean, I genuinely think he's going to come back and they're going to be like, "What now?" And who knows how he's going to react, but I think it'll be very interesting to see if they kind of look into how are all these characters who have known him for such a long time, how they how they view his change, if there is one, because
Right.
he's always been this, figure to look up to of, this is the right way. This is the only, he's always been so looked up to. So if he ever does change up, how are these characters going to respond, especially someone like Scott, who, maybe looks to Charles as, a father figure, if anything, while he's also trying to also be a father. I know that's a little bit more complicated, but it'd be interesting to see if he comes back at all as anything different, and see how those characters interact with him. It'd be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about this season, especially about like how you approach situations. Like even I think it was the second episode because it was the X-Force episode when Jubilee was talking to Cable and she was like, this isn't how we do it. This is not how the X-Men do it. But maybe it'll be how the X-Men do things in the future with a Charles who has one goal in mind, and his only simple goal is to stop Apocalypse, whatever that takes. So that'll be interesting. I think that's something that is worth watching. I don't know if we're going to address that in the next episode, to be honest, because I think, not to like get ahead of ourselves, but I'm pretty sure the next episode is going to be focused on Wolverine. I think that's pretty obvious based on the title of the episode, the end credit scene with Cap and Black Widow. So I think he's kind of going to be off on his own, probably somehow getting those adamantium claws back, because as we talked about last week, he's definitely not going to have the bone claws for the entire rest of the season. So I think we might actually be getting a small little side quest with Logan. Not to say that everybody isn't going to, or there might not be other X-Men in it, but I don't know that we're necessarily going to get the big reunion of all of the X-Men finally being back in the 90s that was would have naturally followed the end of this episode.
Yeah, and I think I'd be interested to see how Apocalypse returns, because the whole point is like he always pops up in the most inconvenient times, but also how the X-Men are even going to stop him. In the past, they had him, as his most, his weakest point.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was still pretty powerful, but they had the opportunity. Charles and Eric disagreed. They kind of let him slip through the fingers into the portal. And so I'm thinking, if two of arguably the most powerful X-Men aren't able to stop him at his weakest, you're gonna have to get something more. There's got to be some new additions to the team that are really going to help out, because ultimately I don't see how they're gonna stop him. No offense to the X-Men, but they kind of got thrown around like rag dolls. And then of course he became this huge, larger than life character. But I'm also curious to say why he spared Charles. He could have Apocalypse at the very end of the episode very easily could have taken Charles out, but he showed Charles mercy, and that I thought was interesting because, well, like we talked about, Charles is always all about mercy. But why would one of the greatest villains, or the greatest adversaries of the X-Men, spare someone like Charles? I mean, and I'm like, why? I thought that was really interesting.
I definitely think it's interesting. I don't think it was mercy. I think he knew that for Charles, the greater punishment is living with the guilt of what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Because and we'll return to your question in a second because I think it's good, but I think it opens another door, which is they did the exact same thing that they did in the last episode that really PO'd Apocalypse, which was like hide things from him, right? Like Eric hid things from him in episode 3. Charles didn't tell him the full, truth in episode 4. And I understand why you're not telling the guy, like, hey, you're actually like a crazy homicidal maniac in the future. Like, I understand, but at the same time, I don't I don't know why you thought that like hiding the truth from him a second time would go over any better than it did the first time. So that I feel like they kind of like made their own bed there. Both Charles and Magneto tried, and then they were like, I'm not saying that Magneto deserved to die by any means, because we love
No, of course
Magneto,
not.
but it was a direct ramification of their own actions, right? Like they tried to manipulate Apocalypse. It didn't work once, it didn't work twice, and the second time, the exact thing that they were trying to prevent happened. So I think for what, circling back to your question, I think for why Apocalypse did it, I think he knew that Charles was ready to die. Like Charles, if you see when Apocalypse walks up, he almost like, I want to say he puts his head down. Like he is resigned. He's ready for Apocalypse to end it all. But
Yeah.
Apocalypse is like, no, no, no. That's not what's going to be worse for you. What's going to be worse for you is you have to live with this. You have to go back to your X-Men and tell them that because you manipulated me, you and Magneto, that he is dead because of you. You have to live with that, and you have to let all these people know. I mean, I don't know how much he knows about the other team, but you're the rest of the team, I should say. But like, he knows that. I think he knows that Charles is kind of someone who people look up to, and so having him fall off that pedestal is a form of punishment, and he wants him to have to sit with that and live with it. There's no easy out in death for him, and I think that's why he did it.
Yeah, I mean, also, if anything, too, like if a broken Charles goes back to the 90s, maybe he's unable to lead the team,
Also
So,
true.
like, Apocalypse could say, hey, here's an opportunity to weaken the team even more and give me a more, I'm assuming level playing field because I have a feeling, maybe the X-Men pull it off, but you never know. But maybe that was like to your point, if he comes back a broken man and doesn't know how to help his team, it weakens them even more significantly to have your centerpiece come back and not know what to do and be scared and because I mean, again, Charles saw one of his greatest friends and often through the comic greatest adversaries just be totally demolished. We're assuming, I like Marvel loves to pull on those strings and be like, they're not really dead.
We
As
didn't
we
see a
know,
body, and you know the rule: no body, no death.
that's what I'm
But
saying. Like Coulson, we didn't, he came
yeah,
back. I mean, I know it's a sensitive subject with you and Katie, but Wanda, we didn't see her die.
this is true. We are
The
big
cave
Wanda's
just went
coming back
crushed.
fans.
I know Katie's really big on the House of M. But also too, I'm wondering, like, because in your predictions episode, you and Katie discussed how, like, or maybe it was your reaction video about how it's like he's going to use Gambit as one of his horsemen. Do we think because Rogue discussed how much she? I mean, I assume Apocalypse has ways of figuring it out, but was Rogue telling him about, oh, I loved, I lost someone that I loved, going to be the reason why we see a Gambit horseman? Because what better way to distract someone who cares and loves about someone than bringing back their dead boyfriend as a villain and having them fight? I mean, that would really mess with someone like Rogue's mind, who is very powerful. So if anything, maybe Apocalypse saw that as an opportunity to kind of, again, use Gambit as a horseman, break Charles mentally, as much as he can. I mean, it seems like he's just like slowly but surely chipping away at the X-Men to ensure that he's the survival of the fittest. Like, that's his whole thing, right? His motive is
Yeah,
like, I'm super powerful, I'm a god, and if you're weak, sorry, you're not strong enough. It's survival of the
right.
fittest. So it'll be interesting to see if that comes true. And like you guys said, based on the episode titles, seems like it could be a very high possibility.
That's a good point in terms of like that conversation that Apocalypse had with Rogue, then affecting, because if you think about it, he's having this conversation in like what, 3900 BC or something. Like I don't remember exactly what year, but it's obviously like millennia in the past. And so theoretically, the Apocalypse who arrived in Genosha after the attack would remember that conversation and then be able to act on it. That's interesting. Oh, I like that. I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming that's how it works with the time travel, because this is where it gets confusing, the difference between like how the MCU treats time travel and how this show treats time travel. But theoretically, I like that. That it's like he waited thousands and thousands of years to be able to do that, but it could work.
It's like, hey, here's your dead boyfriend. Goodbye.
That's going to be so rough. And then, I mean, the other thing that I kept thinking of with Magnus's death was that Rogue had a thing with him too. And like, I know that she broke it off, but it didn't really seem like there was like ill will. It just seemed like, hey, like I actually, want to be with Remy, and that's kind of it. Because the way that they didn't interact a lot in ancient Egypt, but they also didn't seem to be like at each other's throats. So she's now lost Remy in the Genosha attack. Now she's lost Magnus. all in the span of a couple of months, that's the other big person who's going to be really affected here, because regardless of, the status of their relationship, they were romantically involved, and that's going to be challenging, I think, for her. She's already in a very, very vulnerable place.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, she landed a pretty hefty punch to Apocalypse, and so she would be very instrumental. But also too, like, it could go both ways. If Remy gets used as one of Apocalypse's horsemen, will that have the opposite effect on Rogue? Will that empower her? Will that make her more vengeful? Like, how does that? It seems like Apocalypse knows how to push the X-Men's buttons, and
Yeah.
like, but I feel like a lot of it could backfire. Again, seeing someone like Eric die could change Charles for the better. Give him more motivation to do good and to defeat him. If bringing back a horseman Remy, helps Rogue defeat, or get more amped up to defeat. So I think all these things that he's doing, yes, are weakening the X-Men momentarily, but I think ultimately they could backfire, and kind of nip him in the bud, because like, I don't know, like you're bringing them down momentarily. At least I hope, and can bring them back really quickly. So that'll be interesting to see what they do, because how are they going to change? What is the team going to look like? And then as motivations change for better or for worse, what does that mean for the team? And what does Apocalypse, how do they react to that?
Well, and the other thing to think about too is, like, you have, especially, I mean, I don't want to say that the team coming from the future is not dealing with trauma from that experience. I think especially Scott and Jean having to leave Nathan, I think they're going to have to kind of rectify all of those emotions that they feel about that, and, sit with it, and kind of deal with it. But I think what happened in the past in ancient Egypt was so much more violent, and I think that team is going to come back, and to your point, they could be very different, and that could be a very different looking X-Men team. They might operate not in the way that they have in the past, and if they're doing that, how does that then fit in to the other teams that we've seen, right? We have X Factor and X Force that have both stepped up in very different ways to try to, fill the void left by the X-Men when they left the 90s. But what does a potentially different X-Men team, different not in makeup, but different in character, look like? And how does that fit in with these other two teams? Because now they might operate less like an X Factor. Not that they were ever, doing the government's bidding, but they were working with the government when they could and trying to cooperate and things like that. And they might operate more like an X Force, shoot first, ask questions later. That could be very, very interesting to see how all of that plays out. Because I think mutant politics after the absence of the X-Men is never really going to be the same. And so there's a lot of it that's going to hinge on how the X-Men approach everything that's going to happen, because there's going to be a lot of eyes on them now that they're going to be back.
And it will be interesting to see too how the public's view of the X-Men have shifted.
Yeah.
Because once you have these super cool, awesome heroes protecting you, and then suddenly they're gone,
Mm-hmm.
and then they come back, does that shift the public's perspective and how they feel about the X-Men? Right? Because if it's like, oh, hey, we've had so much support from this group, and then they disappeared, and then they come back, are we going to welcome them with open arms? Are, like, you know what I'm saying? So it's like,
right.
That's like having, your world just disappear, your protectors disappear and come back, and you're like, okay, am I supposed to clap? Like, you guys left us. But I mean, they obviously didn't choose to leave, the public.
But the public
like,
may not know that. And that's
right.
the thing.
It's like, where are you? And what has been going on? Like, that's also the little wonky thing about time travel. And anytime they said Back to the Future, I'm like, oh, my favorite movie. So I like time travel, but this part makes me think time travel is difficult to understand, but it's like, how much time has passed? We had the group come back, in time, and Charles and Xavier got stuck. How long has it been? That's another thing too. How have things changed? Has the group, like Beast, Nightcrawler, and Rogue, and who else is Morph? How long have they been in the present? Wasn't
I don't
or
think
Morph is
Morph
in the
is in.
future?
I think Morph is in. Morph was in the future. Yeah.
Okay, so it was Beast, Rogue,
Nightcrawler,
Nightcrawler.
Magnus,
Okay, so it's
and
just the three.
Charles.
So it's like, how long have
Yeah.
they been back in the present? What
Right.
has been going on in the present? That's another thing that's like, I'm sure we'll learn about in the next episode. But what has been happening? Like, how has the X-Men team been operating? Have they been operating? Have without their two biggest leaders so far?
Yeah, because you're right. The team from the future came back. Obviously, the end of their what is for us episode 1, but like what is the amount of time that's elapsed between episode 1 and the end of episode 4 when the team from ancient Egypt come back? So to your point, you've got Scott, you've got Storm, Jean, all of which are leaders of the X-Men, of course. People look up to them, some of the oldest X-Men, but they have, to your point, been operating without Charles, without Magnus, who really like are the leaders in name. So that's going to be interesting. I think the other thing that kind of brings up for me, and this is why I like struggle with time travel, is like I know the team in ancient Egypt mentioned they'd been there for like months, right? So if they'd been there for months, are those like the same amount of months in the 90s? Is time moving the same way? I would think yes, because it's not like they moved in this show. We think they didn't move to a different timeline or universe, so it should move in like a parallel way, like one day equals one day. But I guess we don't really know that. So months for the folks in ancient Egypt may have like 2 months or whatever, maybe 6 months for the people in the 90s who have now, to what you were saying, gotten very used to life without the X-Men and all of those ramifications. And the longer that the X-Men are away, the more they're going to have to deal with when they get back, both from a public perception standpoint, a relation, like a mutant human relation standpoint, even just we saw in, I want to say, episode 1, the young kids who are trying to find the X mansion, find what's supposed to be a safe haven for them. With them not being there for so long, like, are people going to stop viewing that as a safe haven? So there's just a lot of different questions to be had, and it'll be really interesting to see what unification of the X-Men in the 90s in future episodes looks like. What does damage control look like, and not like the DODC damage control, like general damage control look like, and how do they, also share information? Like the team in the future knew so much more about why they were moved around time than the team in the past, because they had the benefit of having Rachel Summers and Mother Ascani with them. So there's a lot of like rectification that needs to happen and conversations that need to happen so they can move forward. And in the meantime, Apocalypse is probably coming, because we saw at the end of episode, I think that was episode 1 or 2, he left and he was saying, I'm going to go get the X-Men when they're weakest in the 90s. Well, I think now, I think I asked last episode, like, why were they weakest in the 90s? What is making them the weakest? But it's actually his own actions, likely. It's, everything that you listed out. It's making Gambit a horseman. It's killing Magneto. It's these, soul wounds that he's literally putting on the X-Men that could tear them apart. So he's actually creating the rift that future him is going to use in order to try to take them out.
Yeah, and I think the biggest question is, what is, again, what is the team going to look like? Because who knows, are they going to join forces with the other two X teams? And I think that would be beneficial. With all this time travel, are we going to get, Cable to come back? That was another question that I had. So, like, you're right. It seems like in the future, or in the 90s, there is no, there is no mansion, there is no Professor X, there is no Magneto. How does that look like, and how is that going to impact, like, the younger, like you said, the younger mutants who now have nowhere to go? How is that going to impact them? Is that going to make, mutants less likely to come out of hiding and join forces? Like, because if you think about it, if there's nowhere to go, you got to hide. And then, especially with Apocalypse arriving, when Charles eventually, I mean, I guess he when he arrives back in the 90s, is that going to be before or after Apocalypse shows up and defeat? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
where Apocalypse, I mean, in time travel is pretty instantaneous, so it depends on where Apocalypse goes. If he comes back, he could be already gone. He could have come in, done his damage, and then moved on. So who knows what kind of world Charles is going to come back to? But you would hope. So I guess, okay, so the team from the future is already there,
Mm-hmm.
and then they're joined by Beast. Okay, so I'm wondering too, what's going to happen? What kind of world is Charles going to come back to? And if anything, how is it going to change? Is he going to start over from scratch? Are they going to have to go back in time again and try again and bring the future team back into the past? I think that would be very interesting to try to do a do-over, because if the show is going to heavily lean into time travel, why not bring everybody back to where he was arguably the weakest? And it's kind of like War Machine, or his idea of, do we go back and just strangle him as a baby? What are the morals on that? So I don't think that the X-Men, I think they have a very good solid moral compass, and they're not going to go kill a baby. But if they can maybe go back farther to when he was a kid, I think kids are a lot less, they're more impressionable. And I think if you sit the kid down and say, hey, look, this is what happens. So I do see them going back to the past again. I think their best chance at defeating Apocalypse is going back to ancient Egypt and starting over, and trying to do the convincing again, but this time take a different approach. Because that's another thing we know about Charles, is he always knows how to approach things from a different perspective. That's his big
Mm-hmm.
thing. So he learns his lessons. So do they go back and say, okay, here's what didn't work the first time. Can we again try to impress upon him the need to, instead of his whole survival of the fittest, say, hey, look, you're the very first mutant ever. In the future, you end up, maybe they just cold say it how it is. Like, look, you're in the future, you're going to destroy all mutants, and I get where you're coming from. But if they can maybe do the whole mantra of like the movies where it's like, let's just take him back to the past, or take him back to the present when he's just a kid. Like, maybe they can, spare him the life the terrible. This episode also was interesting because you kind of feel for Apocalypse a little bit,
You do.
which
Yeah.
makes it difficult, because it's like, okay, like here's him, he got abandoned as a child, he got forced into slavery. It kind of sucks. Like, you kind of get where he's coming. Obviously he turns into a bloodthirsty monster, and you stop relating to him a little bit, but it's like,
Yeah, at a certain point.
you kind of feel bad for him until then he just up and kills Magneto, and you're like, okay, so this guy stinks, and he needs to be gone. But if they can go back to and spare him the pain that shaped him into the very vengeful person that he became, even in just ancient Egypt, I think that's a solid method of going about it. But because will that give Charles too much pain? You know what I'm saying? How painful it is to go back there and remember what happened. So it's just like, I don't know, but that'll be interesting to see. It's like, can he be redeemed? Because that's Charles's whole thing. He's like, let's work on it. And with Magneto out of the way, well, that sounds bad, but
With
without
Magneto no longer on the board, maybe.
yes, with Magneto not lying, go back there
Yeah.
and be very truthful and be like, look, we have to stick together. That's Charles's whole thing. We have to, if you're a mutant, there's a brotherhood, there's a family for you. Come
Mm-hmm.
back with us. So it'll be interesting to see if they go back to Egypt, or they kind of stay in the present and fix things, and then work focus on the future. But I think to me that's their best shot at Apocalypse, is going back in time and trying to put an end to it before it even starts. But will that even be possible? Because you go to the future or the present in the 90s, what does it look like? Do they still have the technology? Apocalypse could have wreaked havoc already. Who's still there? Who's still alive?
Yeah, it's a good point. I didn't really think about them going back to ancient Egypt. I don't know that they will, only because I feel like now that they're all reunited, I don't see them splitting the teams back up. Like, I think that they're going to stay in the 90s and fight him in the 90s, and they're going to have to find a way to beat him there. I think that, I could see obviously Cable's like prophesied to be the end of Apocalypse, so I could see, Cable finally fulfilling that mission. But I think it's going to take all of them. Like, I think that they're going to have to find a way to work across team lines, whether that's X-Men, X-Force, X Factor. I can see us having this like really big fight where it's going to take everyone to fight Apocalypse. I do think that if they were to go back in time, I like your methodology of trying to work with him when he's younger, saving him from some of the trauma that creates the rage. I mean, Charles has a really interesting line in this episode where he talks about, he says something like, I'm having trouble like getting through to him through the rage, because to your point, he's gone through so many horrible things that's the prevailing emotion. And so Apocalypse is not really able to like get over that and move through it. He also, really just needs a lot of therapy to move through it, and that's not what he's getting. So, not to make light of it, but I think if you're able to your point, to spare him from some of that, instead of just having this rage, there is a level of like understanding of, okay, if I follow this path of rage, then I become someone I don't want to be. And I guess that just comes down to who he is intrinsically. Is he someone who's going to look at the cautionary tale that Charles tells him and say, actually, you know what? I hear what you're saying, but it sounds like future me has a lot of power. That's one way he could go. Or he could say, you know what? I hear what you're saying, and I want to be part of the future of mutants and bringing about a better future with them. So that'll be fascinating. That would be fascinating. I don't think they're going to do that. Like I said, I think they're going to fight him in the 90s, but it would be cool to see almost like a what if scenario of like, if they had gone back to a different time in ancient Egypt, would that have worked better? I also think it was very much to their detriment, and we talked about this last episode, that they did not have the benefit of Mother Ascani explaining to them why they were sent back there. Like, they really bungled that first attempt with him. And I think essentially Magneto was trying to do what Mother Ascani wanted him to do, right? She was trying to stop Apocalypse, stop En Sabanor from becoming Apocalypse, but went about it all in the wrong way. I think if they had gone in with maybe like, this is the goal, and everyone had been aware of that goal, because remember, Charles was fighting Magneto for a lot of episode 3 in terms of what Magneto's goals were. I think if they had approached it together as a unit, they would have been much better off, even trying to get adult En Sabanor to finally, or potentially actually, turn that corner and not step into his future as Apocalypse.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point too, because the team is so spread out. Like you said, they don't have the benefit of knowing why that happened, where they're going to go, but it makes sense. Like, I understand El Sabanor.
En Sabanor.
En Sabanor. I get his perspective because 99% of his life he's been powerless, right?
Right.
Abandoned as a kid at your weakest point, enslaved. That's all he wants is power. And so I get it. Like, if you've been stepped on your whole life and you suddenly have a path to the most powerful being in the universe, becoming the most powerful being in the universe, it makes sense why he's doing it. But you would think that he'd want to go about it the right way, which doesn't include killing your fellow mutants. So maybe once not that he's going to have a change of heart, but I think maybe if Apocalypse goes to the 90s and sees the world that Charles was telling him about, the world where there's, a strong group of mutants that are, a family that are coming together, if that will have any impact on him, he's not going to stop. We all know he's not going to stop. But does that give him, is there going to be a moment in a future episode where he kind of stops and looks around and says, I see what Charles was saying, but it doesn't matter because I know in the future I'm the ruler, I'm a god, and it doesn't matter. So it'll be interesting to see how he goes about that. But if he's able to just, have all this power, why would you stop? When you've gone through your life with every step of the way, power being taken away from you, the ability to make choices taken away from you, why would you ever? So I think maybe with the benefit of hindsight, maybe that changes his perspective, his outlook later down the line. but I don't think he's ever going to be like, wait, you know what, you guys are right, maybe I shouldn't seek this power, which he's been so desperately wanting his entire life to be taken away. So I don't know, like it seems like he would just do whatever it takes, but you would think that he'd want to protect his fellow mutants. So maybe seeing mutants in the 90s, how does that change him? How does that impact him? Because again, he grew up his whole life not knowing about the other mutants. He didn't know that there were others of his kind. So if he goes to his future in the main story's present, and he sees others that are struggling and being oppressed, how does that have an impact on what he wants to do and his motives? Like, does that change his outlook, or is he still, he's always going to be the power hungry, but it has to change somebody to see, like, okay, I'm not the only one. There are others like me, but he might be too far gone. I don't know.
I think what would be challenging for that to happen is like the only mutants he's known now are the X-Men in ancient Egypt, and they
And they've
betrayed
done
him
nothing but
twice.
lie and betrayal. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think, so the version of Apocalypse that's likely coming to the 90s is the one from the future, the one that we saw leave his big temple after he was unable to get Nathan. And I think seeing then the mutants in the 90s where they haven't reached a place yet, nor may they ever in this timeline, where they are able to coexist with humans peacefully. And to your point, they're still oppressed. I think, for him, it's just seeing this cycle of oppression and kind of just reinforces that he has to stay on top, because otherwise he could be, the next person to have someone have power over him. I think for him, it's not just survival of the fittest, but it's kill or be killed, eat or be eaten, right? If he's not at the top of the food chain, someone could come and take that hard fought power that he's gotten over the centuries and take that away from him. And I think the 90s, with so much of its strife between, mutants and humans, and the inability to kind of coexist because they haven't gotten there yet, I think that just kind of reinforces it. I think Apocalypse is someone who, because he's so old at this point, we saw him in ancient Egypt, and that was thousands of years ago. He's so set in his ways, I think, and he has, really deep rooted beliefs based on deep rooted scars from early on in his life. And I just don't know, especially after millennia of living, if he's really in a place where he could change at this point. I think, to your point, it would have to be much earlier in his life, when some of those, traumatic events hadn't shaped him the way that they later do.
Yeah. And I think at a certain point, there's no going back.
Yeah.
He's seen the future. He likes it. He's not going to stop until he gets it. But I mean, it makes it complicated, certainly for the X-Men, because how do you stop someone who single-handedly killed arguably one of the more powerful mutants ever in Professor X, or sorry, in Magneto and Magnus? You would think, how is a team like the X-Men going to go about this? How does that happen? Like, it seems unsurmountable, and it seems like the current team, if they can't come together, how are they going to defeat someone like Apocalypse? So is that a team up with X-Force? Does that include more characters that we're excited about in the comics to come back? Are we going to see, like, I think we still hope secretly. I think we all secretly hope that Magnus isn't dead.
Yeah.
But it's pretty, based on Professor X, based on Charles' reaction, it seems like that's the case. But again, no body, no death. That's just how it works.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think if Magneto is able to come back, if Charles is able to get through to Apocalypse, because like you said, like, Charles tried to go in to Apocalypse's head, and he just couldn't. Like, what did he say? It was like Or that am I thinking of something different where like it was like Diamond? That was earlier in episode 2
Oh
with
yeah,
Emma
that was
Frost.
Emma Frost. Yeah, on the Horsemen of War, she like put a barrier or something.
Oh, right. The bowl cut guy. So I think ultimately it seems like Cable might be the only one who's capable of doing it based on what we've heard. That seems like the most likely person, but I'm also like Cable's got a reputation for doing things very straightforward in the wrong way.
Yeah.
So I think Jubilee kind of saw like, hey, how no nonsense Cable is. So it depends on if he's able to come back or not, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be interesting. I think the other big player that for me changes the game completely is Storm. They didn't have
Yeah,
Storm in, ancient Egypt, and that is one crazy powerful Omega level mutant. I mean, we just watched that woman like control solar flares. I mean, if anybody can match Apocalypse on sheer power, it's going to be her. So I think she's another one that not having her in ancient Egypt was definitely to their detriment, but also I want to see her go up against Apocalypse, and I'm sure she did in the original series. It's been a hot minute since I've watched the Apocalypse episodes, but I think she's someone who could go and actually hold her own with him, just based on the amount of power she has. So I actually hope we get that little battle at some point because she's amazing and she could do some damage.
as she should. And like you said, one of the more powerful characters. It'll be interesting to see how she interact because again, like she didn't know she was capable of doing that,
Yeah.
which is even the crazy part. So it's like, what kind of other untapped potential does she have? Like, I think she's honestly like the secret weapon of the X-Men as of right now, because the team in the past, the team in the present, they didn't see that happen.
Right.
So if
Right.
if Storm's able to come back and she's able to tap into that energy again, like you said, but I guess I don't know enough about the comics to know exactly who ends up taking Apocalypse. So I think I'm going to be either pleasantly surprised or absolutely devastated how it ends up. I'm kind of flying blind into it, which is exciting. Um, but how she's able to tap into a power she didn't know she had so easily just
Yeah.
proves how powerful she is. Like, imagine not
100%.
knowing you're capable of something, and all it takes is being like, try it out.
I've seen you do it in a different timeline, and she was like,
Okay.
bet. Yeah. Yeah. I do want to talk, and you hinted at these at the beginning of the episode. There were a lot of really interesting Easter eggs and characters from, to your point, the live action MCU that we saw in this episode. So obviously, we got Ramatut actually turn and look like Kang the Conqueror in this
That was
episode.
cool.
That was an amazing moment. Very, very cool to see that. Um, the celestial head and that whole the ship being, or I guess it was the temple and then there was the ship inside the temple, that all being from a celestial. I thought it was super interesting that I think En Sabanur says that the god fell from the sky, and I'm assuming when he says god he means the celestial. I actually think it would have been more interesting if the celestial had come from the earth, like how we saw it's Tiamat, I believe, who's like partially out, like coming out of the center of earth in 616 and in the live action continuity. If for some reason in this universe, like they had a similar situation where the celestial did not fully emerge from the earth, because I'm just kind of confused about like how a celestial like crash landed on earth and why did it crash land on earth. They will never ever tell us that answer, like for sure that's never going to be explored again.
No,
um
they're like, oh hey, brave new world. Let's just say, oh, let's hint at what is it? It's made of adamantium,
yes,
and
yes, I was
then
like, was that ever confirmed? But yes.
so it's like, okay, here, like, first of all, Chloe Zhao, amazing director. I personally, not, I mean, getting off course here, but I really did like Eternals. I thought it was
So did
very
we.
underrated.
Yeah.
But then it's like, oh, no other future projects really discuss why this, celestial being is coming out of the ground. Are we not going to touch on it? And then in
Yeah.
Brave New World, they're like, yeah, adamantium, X-Men, we'll figure it out later.
It'll be here later. Yeah, and I mean, I think this show is going to do something similar. Like, I think that they're never going to mention the Celestial again. Like, they saw it in ancient Egypt. It was clearly a Celestial.
Be
We're never going to
eternal.
get an explanation for why it was there or what it was doing or any of that or how it relates to Apocalypse because I don't know that we're really going to explore more of Apocalypse's background. I think we saw what we saw in ancient Egypt. We saw the flashbacks to his childhood and, his time as a slave and basically how we got to the En Sabah that the team met and how we got there. And I don't know that we're going to explore more of that. So that's one thing where I was like, I was cool. It was cool to see it. I was glad to see it, but at the same time, I'm like, I have so many questions.
I'm like, and then Loki forgot about like what it means, and we don't know like, is this thing alive? Is it just talking as a vision? Like it's in the stars, and that's how they find the temple. Is it alive? Is it dead? Like, are they just seeing things? Are they just hearing voices? And it seemed like, or was the thing that lifted off out of the ground part of the celestial, or that was the ship? So I'm like,
yeah, it was Apocalypse's ship.
That's what I was confused about. And like
I
also,
think the way that I was kind of picturing it, because I was also like, wow, there's a lot happening in this one singular space, was like there was the temple that had the celestial head. And then there was also the ship, and the ship was what was talking. I don't think it was the celestial talking to them when he was like, hey, do X, Y, and Z and like create a black hole over this town, which was like a wild, crazy thing to happen. But I think when that happened, that was like the ship that was like the tech that he ended up using that he like uses even in the future because I was like very confused about the whole thing because I was like how did this ship get here, but then I remembered that they were saying that the temple was a place where past, present, and future meet. So it was like if you think about the timeline of Apocalypse, essentially his past, his present, his future are all meeting at that place. So that's why his ship from the future, in my opinion, that's why his ship from the future was there. And that's what was talking, not necessarily the Celestial. I think the Celestial is dead. I don't have anything else to add. That was confusing to me. I'm not gonna lie. That part I was like, I had to like rewind it a couple times and I was like, I haven't had enough coffee. Like I watched it like the first thing when I woke up this morning and I was like, I haven't had enough coffee for this. Like I don't understand.
yeah. And like also too, like who put the hieroglyphics there? That totally ruined their whole plan. It's like, wait a minute. He's like saw it like, oh, I end up being this godlike figure and you're all are below me.
Well, I think that's
very
when,
egotistical.
yeah. I think that's when it was like the past, present, and future mix. Like this temple was showing the past, present, and future of En Sabah slash Apocalypse. So it's not just like his ship was there. It's also like his whole history is laid out. Because I also was like, why are these hieroglyphics like, messing up their whole plan? And then I was like, oh, it's basically like excuse me, like his whole timeline is like converging in that one place. Why? I don't know. I'm gonna be honest. I don't know.
But it's interesting too because when the X-Men first show up, they're like, "Wait a minute, we've been here before." So it'll be very interesting to see if that is explored at all. Like, what do you mean you've been here before? Like, how have you? Like, is it the ship? Like, when have you been on the ship? And I assume it'll be explored in future episodes. But it's like, why is it so familiar to them? Like, at
Well,
what point were they on the ship?
I think it was probably in like the original show. Like they
Oh,
were probably when they were fighting him. I'm sure they were on his ship at some point. I can't think of a specific example because I haven't watched the original show since I was prepping for season 1. That was the assumption I made, was that like because they've fought him in their past, his future so many times that like they were familiar with his tech because at some point they'd come into contact with it. And it just so happened that like his ship happens to be in this temple where all of his history is living in one place.
and I think it's so nice that we're able to experience. I mean, you guys touched on this in your predictions episode, and then also your reactions to 1 through 3. How were able to do so. I mean, they're able to do so much more with animation than they
Yeah.
are in live action. Previously, before I started watching season 2, my only knowledge of Apocalypse was Oscar Isaac.
Oh, as much as we love Oscar on this show. Oh.
Oh, yeah, like stick with Moon Knight, pal. When are
Yeah.
we getting season 2 on that one?
Yeah, for real.
But so it is very. I just love. That's why I love this episode so much, is because I'm learning more about, basically the X-Men's equivalent of Thanos, right?
Yeah.
Like this is their big bad. Does he really die? He never really goes away. He kind of shows up randomly to wreak havoc, and then where does he go? It was really cool for me because I got to learn more about, the big bad, and it will hopefully help me out because, I mean, we don't know what the future of the MCU holds in terms of the movies. I mean, we're going to find out a lot more, I'm sure, in Doomsday. But if, and this is so far in the future, but if we get a glimpse of Apocalypse in a post-credits or mid-credits scene, that would be so cool.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting how, the X-Men will get introduced. And again, we're talking about 97. I know. I'm just super excited about what these implications mean because, whatever happens in the show, will it be canon in, the movies, or is it just going to be like, okay, these things happen in the TV show? So it'd be interesting to see, because like that's what kind of Kevin Feige said at the very beginning, after Endgame. It's like, yeah, you're still going to need to catch up. You're going to keep up with the TV shows. You're going to keep up with the movies to really understand the bigger picture. Or are they just going to keep this to himself? Because there's so many exciting things you can do, again, with animation, the stories, the characters, how colorful. You're able to do a lot more. I'm kind of content with having what happens in these shows stick with the show and stay there, because it's kind of like you said, it's almost like a what if. We get to see all these different things happening, and I'm kind of happy. I mean, like, this show is one of the coolest, Marvel projects since Endgame, in my opinion.
Agreed.
So I would be kind of okay if what happens in the show stays in the show, and then they do something different in the future.
Yeah, I liked the way that my brain likes to organize it is that this show is just a different universe, and like this X-Men team is doing their thing. It's different from the Fox X-Men team. It's different from the X-Men team that we're going to get that's fully situated in 616. And that to me like makes so much sense that way they can all coexist and we can get this amazing show, to your point, that's so beautiful like visually but also like telling such good stories. Um and that to me, I'm like, that all makes sense in my brain. Like, that's cool.
And also the voices, the actor, the voice actors in the show are impeccable. So I think that's one of my favorite things about this show is the voice actors, how they're able to be their own characters, bring life to these characters that we know and love in a different way. So I think that's probably one of my favorite things about the show, aside from it being this, spectacle.
Yeah.
It's really, and it's like one of those TV shows you just pop on like a Sunday morning with a bowl of cereal.
Yep.
That's how it feels like. It feels like, okay, school starts tomorrow, great,
Yeah.
but I have this morning all to myself. So it's like, it's very nostalgic, even though we've never seen it before. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
like it seems like, yeah, you still have your PJs on, you're down in the living room, grab a bowl of cereal, pop it on until, mom and dad are like, go outside. That's what so that it's a good, magical.
It is. It's so good. It's a very cool situation and very, very fun. And I'm a huge fan of what they're doing. I can't wait to see the rest of the season. I think we're in store from some really good stuff. I know when I was scrolling through X today, or not X, Threads, when I was scrolling through Threads today, like everybody's talking about how good this show is. So I think we're very back when it comes to X-Men 97, and that brings me a lot of joy. But all that being said, is there anything else that you wanted to chat through for this episode, or are you feeling like we covered everything on your mental or physical list from episode 4?
I think we pretty much covered everything. Because again, like, it's a very complicated storyline, but it felt very like centered in that, okay, we were given time to focus on this character and his motivations. So I think that's what I liked most about it, is we kept in the same time frame. So everything's very concise, but I'm sure that's all going to change because it seems like, so the 8 episode season.
9, I think.
Okay, so we're almost at the halfway point. what is that going to mean? So I just love this episode. I think it was a great episode that really gave us time to learn more about the character and his motivations, but also ramp up our excitement for future episodes because it's so unknown. Like, we don't know what's going to happen. So I think that's kind of like the most part. Is like, why is it just once a week? Why can't it be twice a week?
I know. Or like every day. Like, wasn't it like What If when they did like the every day? That was a little much. Like, as someone who was, trying to cover that daily, that was a little much. But I don't like waiting in between weeks. So I'm right there with you on that one. But it gives good conversation. Now everybody gets to chat online for the next 7 days, so that'll be fun.
Yeah, who knows? I'm sure Threads, they're already talking about it.
Oh, they definitely are. It's been very fun. But on that note, we are going to wrap up this episode 4 of season 2 of X-Men 97, with special guest Davis filling in for Katie. Thank you for hopping in with us. We are very, very grateful for you doing so. We will be back next week with episode 5 reaction, so make sure that you're tuning in there. We'll also have an episode of Sister Scoop next week. I know we didn't have one this week, so we'll be back with that. You can check out our website and our Buy Me a Coffee linked in the show notes, as well as all of our socials linked in the show notes, where we have all kinds of great content on there for you. And as always, Marvel just blew your mind, so let's talk about it.